Hey guys, so today we're going to be looking at D3.1, and this is actually broken into two extra parts for HL, but this is the only SL one that you need to watch if you're only SL. And so we're going to be looking at page 665 to 674. Continuity and change is our theme. And what we want to be answering is, how does asexual or sexual reproduction exemplify themes of continuity or change? And then what changes within organisms are required for reproduction? So first we need to understand what the difference is between sexual and asexual reproduction. Asexual is the DNA is all the same as the parents, and mitosis is going to be used throughout this process. There's no genetic variation. And so organisms that are well adapted to an unchanging environment, reproducing this way will be extremely successful. But if that environment were to change, they would likely die out because there would be no variation in the DNA to allow for natural selection to select for species that are better suited. So for sexual reproduction, we have two parents. The offspring has unique DNA. Meiosis is used to produce the gametes, and genetic variation is created through that process. And so the offspring might be better adapted to the environment if it's changing, and natural selection would select for organisms that had an offspring that had better adaptations. And we don't know what impact the mutations or the changes would have on their ability to succeed in that environment, but natural selection will select for those that are best suited for the environment. So meiosis is a process similar to mitosis, but with an extra round of division. And it's going to allow for the unique creation of unique gametes, which are sex cells. And these gametes are haploid. They have half the amount of DNA. And that makes sense because we need to take two of them and merge them together, a sperm and an egg. And those would each have half so that you would have a full complement of DNA. Gametes in fungi, unlike humans, so humans have sperms and eggs, and those look totally different. But in gametes in fungi are outwardly identical, and so this is termed isogamy. Whereas plants and animals have gametes that look different for male and female gametes, and so that would be called ansogamous. So when we're looking at the male reproductive system, we do need to be able to name some parts and know what they do. And so we need to know about the seminal vesicle, the prostate gland, the epididymis, the testes, the vas deferens, or sometimes called the sperm duct, and then obviously the penis. So becoming male is governed by the SRY gene on the Y chromosome, and that's going to trigger the SRY gene allows for transcription to happen that allows for the formation of testes to occur in a male embryonic and then fetus. So testes will then start producing testosterone, and that's going to cause male genitalia to form as a fetus in an embryonic stage. So puberty increases levels of testosterone, and that's going to cause the production of sperm in young teenage male individual. And that's also that testosterone is also going to lead to secondary sexual characteristics, such as pubic hair or deepening of the voice, as well as growth of the penis. So when we're thinking of these things, the epididymis here, this little hat on top of the testes make sperm, the epididymis stores sperm, and then when a male ejaculates from the penis, the sperm travel through the vas deferens to the urethra and then out through the penis. And the scrotum is the skin sac that holds the testes. And then the prostate gland here makes a fluid for sperm to swim in. And the seminal vesicle creates a separate fluid that contains fructose, which is a sugar. Sperm have mitochondria and they need sugars to be able to swim effectively. So the seminal vesicle produces fructose, and then also this fluid is alkaline. And so that's going to neutralize the vaginal pH, because the vaginal pH is slightly acidic in order to kill bacteria. So that will neutralize it because sperm don't like to be in acidic conditions either. So then female reproductive organs that we need to know some components about. Female reproductive organs develop in the presence of progesterone and estrogen, which are going to come from the mother's ovaries as well as the placenta when the fetus is developing. And a female is going to develop all of her eggs, her ovum, in her ovaries as a fetus. So for some different components here, we have the ovaries. This is where the eggs are. They will be released 1 per month, typically through the fallopian tube, and then fertilization happens in the fallopian tube. The fertilized egg then comes out and attaches to the inside lining of the uterus. This here is the uterus. The inside lining is called the endometrium, and that is what sheds during menstruation. And then we have the cervix, which is a big muscle here that is going to stabilize the fetus if it is in the uterus. This is the vagina. That's the internal structure of the female reproductive organ. And then on the external component, we would have the vulva here. And the fallopian tubes, I'd already said, this is where fertilization happens. And sometimes these are called the oviducts. So females have 4 main hormones that we need to be aware of and how they work. And so they have positive and negative feedback loops that we need to be aware of. So at puberty, a female is going to produce more estrogen and progesterone. And there's some protein hormones produced by the pituitary gland. FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, is going to cause the follicles that already exist in the ovaries that were put in there, developed when the female was a fetus. Those are FSH that's released by the pituitary gland during puberty is going to start development of the follicles, which will then increase estrogen levels. So the wall of the follicle, so this is the follicle here, is going to release estrogen. And luteinizing hormone is going to trigger ovulation. So ovulation is when an egg is released. And you'll notice here, so a typical average female cycle length is about 28 days. That obviously differs from individual to individual. But the first approximately 4 days, that might be 3 days, that might be 6 days. And this can change throughout a lifetime as well. This is the menstruation time. So day 0 is when a period first starts. And then day 28 would be the last day before the period starts. And so what's going on here is that we have follicle stimulating hormone coming from the pituitary gland. The follicle is developing, it's producing estrogen. Estrogen levels are rising, and high estrogen levels will trigger the release from the pituitary gland of luteinizing hormone, which will trigger ovulation. And so also estrogen helps to regrow the endometrium, the lining of the uterus here, and you can see it getting a bit thicker, but then it's going to continue to get much thicker with the release of progesterone. And so estrogen, when it gets quite high here, just before LH is produced, high estrogen is going to inhibit FSH. So follicles stop developing because in the second half, we don't want them developing. And LH is going to be produced. And then progesterone comes in the second half. So this section is called the first 2 weeks of the menstrual cycle or menstrual time. Menstrual cycle is the follicular phase. And then we have ovulation, and then the luteal phase is the last 2 weeks of the cycle. And so progesterone is released from the corpus luteum, which is the little bag that had the egg in it. And that is going to work to thicken the endometrium even more in case an egg is fertilized and it needs to implant into the endometrium. So if it's going to attach, the endometrium needs to be quite thick and vascularized, meaning it has a lot of blood vessels, so that the placenta can get lots of blood from the mother. Well, lots of blood connections can form between the placenta and the fetus and the mother. And then that way, nutrients and exchange of necessary materials for the embryo can be exchanged. The blood of the baby and the blood of the mother never mix because they might not have the same blood type. And then also when high progesterone levels are in existence, then they also inhibit FSH and LH, because it wouldn't make any sense to have more follicles developing and more ovulation occurring when there was potential that an embryo had already, fertilized egg had already implanted, because that would mean that you would end up potentially having multiple babies growing in a uterus at multiple stages of development. So one's like 1 month old, and one is 2 weeks old, and one's 3 months old. And so obviously, if a woman were then to give birth at 9 months or 10 months, then the reality is that all the other fetuses that were in there would die. That would not be a successful adaptation strategy. Okay, so fertilization, eggs and sperm fuse together. The sperm has on the top of the sperm head something called the acrosome, which has digestive enzymes. So it allows it to digest into the egg. And it's going to go through the zona pellucida, which is this outer layer here of the egg. And once one sperm gets in, then there are cortical granules around that have enzymes in them that will cause this glycoprotein to trigger the zona pellucida to seal up, because that will prevent more than one sperm from getting in. That's called polyspermy. And the egg only wants one set of DNA to merge with its one set of DNA. And so what is then going to happen is that, and this should say there's a typo in here, the egg cell is going to go through another set of meiosis. So it's going to complete meiosis too. And then the nuclear membrane is going to break down and the DNAs will join together. So in IVF, that stands for in vitro fertilization, a woman or a couple may go through this if they're having fertility issues. And so initially, the female is given hormones to stop her FSH and LH production so that the doctors can control what's going on for her. And then it's going to be restarted with injections, again, of hormones. This can be quite a difficult process and make female feel quite unbalanced, kind of like there's lots of hormones going on in her body all at the same time. And that can be quite difficult. But during this process, many follicles will develop and they will be matured with addition of the hormone HCG, which is the pregnancy hormone. That's actually what pregnancy tests are testing for. And then those follicles will be, from those follicles, the eggs will be harvested, and then they'll be bathed in sperm and they will be fertilized. So then once they will be fertilized, then they're implanted into a female's uterus. Typically, that's 1 or 2 or max 3 embryo zygotes. Typically, some will not continue, but IVF can be very expensive in different countries. So it can be very difficult. If you can only do 1 round of IVF, you might have like 8 zygotes there. And so how do women end up with, in some countries, multiple births, like triplets, quadruplets, quintuplets, 4 or 5 different babies? That's what's happened here. They've implanted a ton of zygotes and they've all attached. And then usually those babies are born quite little, because a female uterus obviously cannot hold 5 fully grown babies. And then the woman is given progesterone to maintain her uterine thickness throughout the pregnancy so that the endometrium doesn't detach and cause a miscarriage. So to summarize, males develop genitalia in their 8th week of embryonic growth, and testosterone from the testes is going to cause the production of sperm, but that's going to happen during puberty. Females have all their eggs when they're a fetus, and triggered ovulation is going to happen due to increasing progesterone and estrogen from the ovaries. That's going to signal to the pituitary gland to release LH and FSH, and that happens during puberty. And so there's 4 hormones controlling the menstrual cycle: LH, FSH, estrogen, and progesterone, and they work in positive and negative feedback strategies. All right, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching.